You are listening to the home of Cutting Edge Talk Radio. This is OracleBroadcasting.com.
To Americans, none of it makes much sense. But wherever there is poverty, unemployment, disillusionment, there is also despair. And where there is despair, people may listen to anyone, to any plan that promises a change. This is going to be hard to take, so brace yourselves.
And welcome back. This is Hour 2 of Blacklisted News Radio right here on the Oracle Broadcasting Radio Network. My name is Doug Owen. You can join me online at blacklistedradio.com. We have an interactive chat room there. Lots of ways that you can be part of the show. Your questions, comments, and complaints, I hate to say that, but they are welcome at 512-222-3067. We're joined tonight with our special guest, Rick Biondi. Is that how you say it, Rick? All right, good. I was debating that with my wife before the show here, exactly how I should say it. So I'm glad to see I got it correct. One of the really cool things about doing this show, Rick, is that I get to talk to people like yourself who have written books, authors, and people who are very well informed on things such as world order strategy. You have written a book about the Atlantic Union. So tell me a little bit about yourself and some of the geopolitical interests that led to writing this book.
Well, actually, the book World Order Strategy, Atlantic Union Resolutions, I really didn't write it. I would say that I edited the book. I basically, for the last 10 years, have been researching the Atlantic Union movement for the Association of Unite the Democracies as well as the Ashburn Institute. And I was going through Freedom and Union articles as well as Congressional Record. And basically, the Atlantic Union Resolutions book is kind of a chronology of the key points of the movement. Because, there's over, probably 10,000 pages of Congressional Record, documenting this movement in articles. So it's basically, it condenses it. My interest in the Atlantic Union movement ironically came when I originally started off as a patriot after I left the Army. That was around 1992, and I entered the University of Washington, and I was studying political science, and I just kind of stumbled across the world government movement, which is much broader than the Atlantic Union movement. And, all my professors were telling me that I was crazy for believing that something like this existed. And the more I researched, the more I read about it and researched, just Congressional Record, the more I found that, there really was a campaign for world government, and it has some merits and it has some negative parts to it as well.
Well, absolutely. By the way, Richard is a former executive consultant for the Association to Unite the Democracies. He left there in 2002, as well as being a board member of the Ashburn Institute. He holds a BA in political science from the University of Washington, and we're talking tonight about his book that's available on Amazon, and we'll tell you more about that as the night goes on. I found it very interesting because I do watch a lot of the current unions and some of the legislation, the international treaties like TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and there are some good aspects to it. I like some of the talking points, though I haven't been very impressed with NAFTA or GATT or some of these other examples of what has come out of these treaties and unions. I'm sure there's some pretty good examples and some bad ones, but let's see. We got about a minute here. Why don't we just start with how this began? This initial idea, where you started at in the book.
Well, the first world government hearings that were held in 1910, it was actually the World Federations League of the New York Peace Society, which is associated with Andrew Carnegie. Mm-hmm. They were working with Theodore Roosevelt at the time, who was just receiving his Nobel Peace Prize, and he was the first one really to propose international federation. So what happened was nothing happened. World War I comes, and Clarence Strite, who volunteered for service in the U.S. Army during the First World War, he was actually served as a security operative at the conference that drafted the Treaty of Versailles. And he, after that, became a New York Times correspondent for the New York Times, and started developing his idea called the Atlantic Union idea, and published his book called Union Now in 1939. So that's pretty, the basic union idea, came from Clarence Stride. It was originally published in 1939.
And welcome back. This is Blacklisted News Radio. We are joined with Richard Biondi, former executive consultant for the Association to Unite the Democracies. And we're talking about a new world order, the idea of peace in an age of global democracy. And here's the synopsis of the book that we're talking about, World Order Strategy. Atlantic Union Resolutions documents the words, deeds, and recorded votes of prominent American politicians who attempted to transform NATO into the Atlantic Federal Union of the free from 1949 to the mid-1970s. So let's talk about this idea and this plan, because many people, when you talk about world government or centralized global government on any form, in any fashion, you immediately become a conspiracy theorist. So, for something that's so well known to many in these powerful positions like Truman, Eisenhower, Kennedy, Nixon, Ford, Bush, others that you've noted here, how is it that this is not being sold to the American people as the way forward? I think that it's been done in secret and maybe intentionally.
Well, I don't think it was done in secret. From 1949, you could go down to the library and look up some New York Times, papers and actually see this movement being covered in the news. So it's not as if something that they were deliberately trying to hide.
Right.
For example, so what happened is that 1949 rolls around, and Clarence Stride had proposed his Union Now. It became a New York Times best-selling book at the time. People knew about it. A lot of people were focused on the United Nations at the time, so it didn't get too much emphasis. But essentially, what happened is that the Atlantic Union Committee was established by Will Clayton, former Supreme Court Justice Owen J. Roberts, and Clarence Stride, and they created Atlantic Union Commission specifically to help introduce a resolution called the Atlantic Union Resolution in Congress to call an Atlantic Convention, to bring representative citizens from around the Atlantic community to sit down and discuss and potentially draft an Atlantic Constitution similar to the way we did in Philadelphia in 1787. So this was an idea that was not necessarily unknown at the time in 1949. I think a lot of people just weren't paying attention. But from my research from 49 to the mid 1970s, there really wasn't any attempt to conceal this movement at all.
Right. Well, I guess it seems that over maybe the last 20 years, when I talk about these issues, people's like, oh, yeah, whatever, you crazy kook guy talking about global government. Sure. And very prominent people talked about these ideas at the time. I think that unfortunately, rather than having an open, transparent discussion here in the 21st century about it, it doesn't quite fit the narrative to get people to buy into all of the good aspects of this proposed union. So the idea of creating global governance